Hey everyone, Ben from Snowboard Gamer. In my last video, I went over my board game shelf of shame, which are all the games that I've purchased but haven't played yet. In this video, I'm gonna go through all the games that I've played off of my board game shelf of shame in the last year. It's been a bit since I made that video, and I set a goal where at the beginning of 2022 to get through my whole board game shelf of shame, which is about 24 games left. I have about 250 in my collection, so roughly 10% of my collection I have not played yet. So instead of buying new games this year, I'm gonna focus on playing the existing games that I already have. But let's get right into catching you up from the games that I've played over the last year-ish that are on my board game shelf of shame, starting with Ticket to Ride Europe. Ticket to Ride Europe is the European variation of the game Ticket to Ride. So instead of the map being the United States, it's in Europe. And it's pretty much the same game as Ticket to Ride with two minor little differences. There are ferries and there are tunnels. And the ferries are these wild spots where you have to use a locomotive, which is the wild card. There might be a spot that's like 4 long and it has 2 of them locomotives. So you can do any color there, but 2 of the 4 cards have to be locomotives. The other one is the tunnel mechanic, and everybody gets 3 tunnels at the start of the game. What you can do with those tunnels is, let's say there's a city that's really hard to get to and it's all blocked off because it's really congested and everyone is going into that city. You can put a tunnel 1 space away and basically ride off of someone else's route in order to hit that city. And that was a really cool mechanic that they added, because in the original Ticket to Ride, if you can't get into a city, you're kind of hosed. So this allows you to do that. The next game we played is Eldritch Horror. This is a Cthulhu-themed game set in the H.P. Lovecraft genre of games, which is a short story back in the, I think it was 1920s, that H.P. Lovecraft wrote about Cthulhu, which is the sea monster with all the tentacles. Eldritch Horror is a cooperative game. I like to describe it as sort of like Pandemic. Monsters are spawning, you're trying to kill the monsters and close the gates. One person might get the shotgun, and so they're better at fighting. You've got health and sanity, which is very common in these H.P. Lovecraft type games. You're battling monsters, you're trying to keep your sanity at the same time preventing this giant monster from spawning into the world. Next game is Dead of Winter. Dead of Winter is another game that's cooperative, sort of. Everybody has their own objective. You're basically huddled together in this post-apocalyptic setting where zombies are spawning. One cool thing I liked about it is it really simulated that whole end-of-world zombie kind of atmosphere where your home base, you're pretty safe there, but when you venture out to all these locations, you go to the police station to get weapons, you go to the gas station to pick up gasoline, it's a lot more treacherous out there, and the zombies have a much greater chance of hitting you and doing damage and killing you, but you have to venture out to get all the stuff necessary in order to complete your objectives. And sometimes your objectives might be in line with other people, sometimes they might be off a little bit. So when I say it's semi-cooperative, you could have everyone win the game, or you could have 1 person win the game, or 3 people win the game. It's really just a fun game fighting zombies. I really enjoyed Dead of Winter. The next game we played is Brass Lancashire. Brass Lancashire is set in the Industrial Revolution in England from 1770 to 1870. You're building these network routes to be able to connect all these cities and get coal and resources. When I say route building, if you've ever played Power Grid and you're connecting all the cities, it had a similar feel to that, but there's definitely a lot more going on to it than in Power Grid. The next game we played is On Mars. It's a ginormous game where you're basically trying to settle Mars. It's got this really cool mechanic where you're in space and there's a shuttle that leaves periodically and kind of shuttles back and forth between the two. I only played it once and it took us a good 4 or 5 hours to get through, but that was with rules and all of that. My son has played it a few more times since then, and he said it's about 1.5 hours to 2 hours. So it's definitely a longer game. It's not lighthearted, so if you're looking at On Mars, be prepared for a long night. The next game we played is The Crew, The Quest for Planet 9. The Crew is a cooperative trick-taking game. Trick-taking is where everybody plays a card and then the highest card wins the trick. There's 50 levels in the game. We started it as a family. We got 10 to 12 levels in, I think. We're really enjoying this game. Basically, you've got a different goal each round. And so some goals might be like you have to take the tricks in a certain order, and there's certain things you can do to sort of telegraph to people if this is your only card, your highest card. You have to work together and try and pick up on the clues of everyone else that's playing with you and try and beat that level, and then you move on to the next level. So there's a lot of game in this little box here. And it won the Kennerspiel des Jahres, which is the Connoisseur Board Game of the Year a few years ago. The next game we played is an Acrony. With the discovery of time rifts, you can time travel in the game. And that's what I found the most interesting about this is if you just play the game in a linear fashion, you're not gonna win. You have to time travel to the future, borrow resources from yourself, and then pay yourself back in the future. If you're looking for a kind of a head twister where it really makes you think, then an Acrony is a good game to go with. And I like the time travel aspect of it. Very well done in the game. The next game we played is Oh My Goods. This is a little mini card game. It kind of reminds me of one of the farming games, the Uwe Rosenberg games like Caverna, Agricola, but in a really small portable box. It plays in 30 minutes. There's these different phases that you go through. You're trying to build these engines, and it's sort of like a supply chain. You produce here, and then you use those resources to do this over here. Fun game. The next game we played is the Manhattan Project. This is a game about building the atomic bomb. It's worker placement, but it's got this really cool mechanic where there's a board in the middle and some common spots where you can put your guy and take that action. You get cards, which builds your own tableau of worker action spaces that only you can use. But there's an espionage spot on the main board where you can go and potentially use other people's buildings. So there's some player interaction there. The one mechanic of it that wasn't my favorite was the airplane mechanics. So you have fighter jets and bombers, and you can basically attack other people and bomb their buildings, take them out of commission, which is pretty detrimental to someone else's strategy. That's just not my favorite mechanic in a game. I like to focus on my own game and not constantly be fighting back and forth. But outside of that though, I love the mechanic of building your own tableau of worker placement spots that you can put all your workers on. The next game we played is Point Salad. Point Salad is a card game. It goes up to 6 players, which is nice. Not a ton of depth to it. There's basically a whole bunch of different ways to score points. You have this choice between getting more vegetable cards versus getting a card that will score you points. Not my favorite 15 to 30 minute game, but it was fun. The next game we played is Brew Crafters. In Brew Crafters, everyone is a brewer. You're collecting all the ingredients to brew beer, hops, yeast, barley, fruit maybe. There's different types of beers, porters, IPAs, and they score different points in different ways. It's worker placement, so you put your guys out on the board in order to gather the resources. Then you brew the beer, then you bottle it, put it on trucks, and ship it out to be sold. I really enjoyed Brew Crafters. We played it a few times now. And the last new game that we've played is called Not Alone. Not Alone is an asymmetrical game where you've landed on a planet and there's this giant monster chasing you. One person plays as the monster and everyone else plays as the survivors. It's kind of like a mind reading game. So there's all these different cards in the middle and you're taking cards which do different actions. The monster has to try and predict who's gonna do what. And if the monster can properly predict, then they can really make a big move and hurt the other team. But if the other team gets tricky and can deceive the monster, then they can win. It's nice that it goes up to 7 players, not a ton go up to 7. So it's definitely in that sort of party genre, 30-minute game. Those are just the quick hits on the last 12 games that we've played off of our board game shelf of shame. Are there any of these that you'd like for me to go into more detail on? I can make a video about Dead of Winter, for example, if you're really interested in that one, and do kind of a close-up, in-depth chat about that game, what I liked about it, what I didn't. Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time. Bye.